It is the greatest civilization that never was, an empire of untold wealth, technological marvel, and divine power, a continent-sized island nation that ruled the ancient world, and then vanished in a single day and night of catastrophic destruction. The story of Atlantis has been called a myth, a metaphor, a memory, and a map. For over 2,000 years, it has lured explorers to their deaths, sparked wars of academic debate, and stubbornly refused to be dismissed. But what if the final answer is not what anyone expected? What if, scattered across the globe, in the deserts of Africa, the islands of Greece, and the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, the fingerprints of Atlantis are still waiting to be found? Today, we are not just retelling a legend. We are deconstructing the entire mystery. We will trace Atlantis from its singular source through the most compelling and controversial theories ever proposed, and finally, to a shocking new possibility that changes everything. This is the ultimate search for the lost city. Our story must begin with a single, undeniable fact. Every single mention of Atlantis in the entire ancient world traces back to one man. The Greek philosopher Plato, writing around 360 BCE. Plato wasn't a historian. He was a master storyteller using a philosophical dialogue to make a point about the perfect society. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he has a character, Critias, recount a tale he heard from his grandfather, who heard it from the great Athenian lawgiver Solon, who in turn heard it from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. The Egyptian priests, Plato writes, told Solon a story of a great power that existed 9,000 years before their time, placing its destruction around 11,600 years ago. An island empire, larger than Libya and Asia combined, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato describes Atlantis with astonishing architectural precision. It wasn't just a city, it was an engineering marvel, a circular island with alternating rings of land and water connected by bridges. In the center, a royal palace and a temple to Poseidon, plated in gold, silver, and the mysterious fire-flashing metal, orichalcum. It had massive harbors, complex canals, and an army that conquered Europe and North Africa before being stopped by a primordial version of Athens. But then, Plato says, the Atlanteans became corrupt and greedy. As punishment, there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. For centuries, scholars debated whether Plato's story was fact or allegory. Even Aristotle, Plato's own student, reportedly dismissed it, saying, "The man who dreamed it made it vanish." Is Atlantis just a thought experiment on the hubris of empires, a cautionary tale written by a philosopher? Or is Plato's detailed blueprint, with its precise measurements and geographical references, a clue that he was describing something real? This is the central tension of the entire mystery, and to resolve it, we have to leave the safety of the text and plunge into the deep. If we take Plato's word literally, beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean, where would the most obvious place to search be? Right here, the bottom of the Atlantic. This is the classic theory. In fact, a man named Ignatius Donnelly almost single-handedly birthed the modern Atlantis obsession with his 1882 book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Donnelly was a U.S. congressman and a pseudoscientific powerhouse. He argued that Atlantis was not just a city, but a literal continent, the cradle of all human civilization. Donnelly's theory was breathtakingly simple. The same gods, the same pyramid-building obsession, the same flood myths found in cultures from the Bible to the Maya, they all originated from a single, now sunken source, Atlantis. But this is where Plato's timeline crashes directly into the unforgiving wall of modern science, the science of plate tectonics and seafloor spreading. We have mapped the entire Atlantic seafloor. We have drilled into it. The rock that makes up the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean is geologically young, formed from cooling magma at the mid-Atlantic ridge. There is no sunken continental crust hiding under the sediment. The ocean floor is thin, dense, basaltic rock. A continent made of thick, buoyant granite cannot simply sink into it. It is a geophysical impossibility. The Atlantic theory, in its literal form, is dead, but the theory's collapse created a diaspora of believers who scattered across the globe, searching for a new home for Plato's sunken empire. And that's where things start getting weirdly and wonderfully plausible. For many serious archaeologists, the search for Atlantis doesn't begin and end in the ocean depths. It ends here in the Aegean Sea, on the island of Santorini, ancient Thera. This is the most scientifically respected candidate, and the visual match is uncanny. A circular island with a ring of water. Sound familiar? Around 1600 BCE, Thera was a prosperous Minoan outpost. The Minoans, based on Crete, were the most advanced civilization in Bronze Age Europe. And then, the volcano at Thera's heart erupted in one of the most violent cataclysms in human history. The eruption was 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa. It vaporized the center of the island, creating a massive collapsed caldera that instantly flooded with seawater. The tsunami it generated devastated the Minoan ports and fleet on Crete, a civilization-crippling blow from which they never fully recovered. The parallels are staggering. A sophisticated, thalassocratic, sea-ruling power. A circular, ringed island. A sudden, catastrophic end involving water and earth-shaking violence. And it happened not 9,000 years before Plato, but roughly 1,100 years before him. This suggests Plato's 9,000 could have been a mistranslation of the Egyptian word for 900. So, case closed, Santorini is Atlantis? It's a powerful and evocative theory, but we have to be careful. The Minoans were not a secret to the Egyptians. They traded with them extensively. Plato specifically sets Atlantis in the Atlantic, beyond the Mediterranean. Santorini is a compelling source of inspiration for the Cataclysm, but it doesn't fit the geographic brief. The Santorini theory is the most likely explanation for the flood myth and the destruction archetype. But if we stick rigidly to Plato's geography, we have to look somewhere else. Somewhere that, incredibly, matches the description with laser scan precision. Welcome to the internet's favorite Atlantis candidate, the Richat Structure, a geological formation in the Sahara Desert. It is a perfectly concentric circle, 25 miles across, so striking that astronauts use it as a landmark. When you look at Plato's text, the match is electrifying. He describes a central island with a diameter of 5 stadia, surrounded by a ring of water, then a ring of land, 2 stadia wide, then another ring of water. The proportions of the Richat structure map almost eerily onto his blueprint. The proponent of this theory, popularized by the Bright Insight YouTube channel, points to a cascade of corroborating evidence. First, the size and layout match. Second, the mountains Plato describes to the north of the city could be the Atlas Mountains. Third, the area is rich in evidence of ancient water, massive river channels that dried up, fish fossils in the sand. And fourth, the local king of the Mauritanian region is described by ancient historians as Atlas. The theory proposes a dramatic, climate-based disaster. Around 11,600 years ago, the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose catastrophically. The theory suggests a mega tsunami from the Atlantic slammed into this region, which at the time was a fertile, low-lying landscape of rivers and lakes, destroying the city and then stranding it when the waters receded, leaving it to dry out in the desert for the next 12 millennia. It's a brilliant, data-driven narrative, but it has one fatal flaw. The Richat structure is not a ruined city. It is a 100-million-year-old geological dome that has been eroded flat. The rings are not artificial canals, but concentric ridges of resistant rock like quartzite. Geologists are unanimous on this. There are no building foundations, no artifacts, no tool marks. It is one of nature's most majestic works of abstract art. The Richat structure is a phenomenal example of how our pattern-seeking brains can project a legendary city onto a natural canvas. It perfectly fits the blueprint because our minds want it to. It's a celestial Rorschach test. What if Atlantis wasn't in the middle of the ocean, but simply on the coast? In the last 2 decades, a team of international researchers has been methodically scanning the Doñana National Park in Andalusia, Spain. This isn't wild speculation. It's a scientific endeavor that has used satellite archaeology, digital mapping, and deep core sampling. And what they believe they've found under the mud is a city. They are looking for Tartessos, a wealthy, enigmatic civilization that traded with the Phoenicians and suddenly vanished around the 6th century BCE. The ancient Greeks themselves sometimes conflated Tartessos with the Atlantean legend. Could the Atlantean war with Athens be a distorted memory of conflicts between Mycenaean Greeks and the powerful city-states of Iberia? The team, led by Dr. Richard Freund, has found compelling evidence. A series of concentric circular structures buried under the sediment, which they interpret as artificial canal rings. They also point to a widespread memory of destruction in the region, with multiple coastal sites showing evidence of a powerful paleo-tsunami that swept inland around 1150 BCE. The theory paints Atlantis not as a hyper-advanced, crystal-powered superpower, but as a wealthy Bronze Age port city, built with ritualistic concentric circles, situated in a bay outside the Pillars of Hercules. A massive earthquake and tsunami liquefied the ground, and the city, built on unstable coastal sediment, was literally swallowed by the earth in a single day and night. This is the most grounded, archaeologically sound theory for the city of Atlantis. It checks the boxes for outside the pillars, circular city, and sudden destruction. It's a real lost city, right where Plato said it would be, but scaled down from a continent-spanning empire to a powerful local kingdom. We can't talk about the 9600 BC timeline without addressing the most terrifying and compelling theory in recent history. For decades, the archaeological establishment dismissed the notion of a global cataclysm at the end of the last ice age. But the younger Dryas impact hypothesis has shattered that consensus. The evidence is now overwhelming. A nano-diamond-rich layer of black matte found on 4 continents, melted glass formations in the Sahara, mega-flood scars across the American Northwest. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth was hit by a fragmented comet. The impacts melted colossal ice dams, causing a sudden, unfathomable pulse of meltwater to surge into the world's oceans. In a human lifetime, sea levels rose up to 300 feet. Any sophisticated coastal or low-lying maritime civilization that existed during the Ice Age would have been completely annihilated. Its cities, likely built on the fertile continental shelves, would now be under hundreds of feet of water, buried under millennia of sediment. This isn't pseudoscience. This is the emerging frontier of planetary science, and it provides a catastrophic global mechanism for how a real Atlantis could have been lost. The survivors would have been refugees, fleeing the inundating coastlines for higher ground, carrying with them the trauma, the stories, and the seeds of what would become the Neolithic Revolution. Plato's story might not be a fiction, but a fossilized echo of that pre-Diluvian world passed down through 300 generations. We've searched for Atlantis with shovels, sonar, and satellites. But what if the most critical piece of evidence has been hiding inside our own minds? This isn't a theory about a physical location, but a theory of consciousness. The Atlantis Plato describes might not be a map of the Earth, but a map of the human psyche under the influence of a lost spiritual technology. Let's look closely at the Minoan frescoes of Akrotiri, preserved in ash like a Bronze Age Pompeii. What do we see? Women gathering crocus flowers, a goddess receiving offerings of saffron. We know now that the crocus stigmas they handled so intensely were saffron, a spice with proven mood-altering effects. And in the context of a visionary ritual, other, more potent ingredients are likely in play. The concentric rings of Atlantis are not just an urban plan. They are a vision, a universally occurring entoptic pattern seen in altered states of consciousness. The great scholar Mircea Eliade noted that celestial cities, perfect sacred metropolises of gold and concentric rings are an archetype found in shamanic traditions worldwide, from the Tibetan Shambhala to the Aztec Aztlan. Perhaps the Egyptian priests gave Solon not a history lesson, but a theological one, mediated by a ritual entheogen. They showed him a vision of the perfect city, a heavenly archetype, which he returned to Greece and misconstrued as a physical place. The cataclysm wasn't a flood of water, but a flood of forgetting, the loss of the ancient mystery rites that connected humanity to this visionary dimension. Atlantis didn't sink. Our ability to see it was closed off. We have 5 competing fascinating theories: a philosophical allegory, a Bronze Age volcanic cataclysm, a mirage in the desert, a mud-swallowed harbor, a cosmic holocaust. Each is powerful, each is incomplete, but the final unsettling truth may be a synthesis of them all. What if Plato's story is a twilight language, a narrative that is simultaneously a historical account, a geographical riddle, and a philosophical allegory? Plato, the master of the noble lie, may have woven a true history of a lost Tartessian-like city, destroyed by a real younger Dryas-era cataclysm, into a moral fable about the ideal state, and encoded its location in a text that only the initiated would understand. The question isn't, did Atlantis exist? The real question is, where didn't it exist? The myth is a composite photograph of human trauma. It is the memory of the Sundaland Plains being swallowed by the rising South China Sea. It is the memory of Doggerland, the heart of Mesolithic Europe, vanishing beneath the North Sea. It is the memory of the coastal plains of India, home to a civilization sung about in the Mahabharata, now drowned in the Gulf of Kampat. These weren't flying car super-civilizations. They were advanced, complex hunter-gatherer and proto-agricultural societies living on the Ice Age coasts, the most fertile land on Earth. They were ground zero for the younger Dryas sea level rise. Their entire worlds were destroyed. The myth of Atlantis is the composite scream of 100 different cultures, all witnessing their homelands vanish beneath an unrelenting, rising tide. We are a species with amnesia, living on the high ground, telling stories about the lights we once saw in the deep valleys now filled by the sea. The lost city is not one place. It is a lost world, and its memory is encoded in our oldest stories, waiting for us to finally understand. The search for Atlantis is never just about finding a city. It is about proving that our ancestors were more than we remember, that they were capable of greatness, and that we, like them, are vulnerable to the same cosmic and planetary forces. We search for Atlantis to prove that the myth is real, but in the end, the act of searching reveals a deeper truth. The real lost city of Atlantis is the past itself, a magnificent, terrifying, and largely inaccessible country, where entire civilizations shine once in a single text and then are swallowed by time. The only machine that can take us there is the human imagination, powered by the evidence we can gather, the ruins we can touch, and the stories we must tell. Atlantis is the name we give to the haunting, beautiful, and eternal mystery of what came before. And as long as the ocean keeps its secrets, we will keep diving. Keep searching. The truth is, down there,